Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Jenny White.
Boy, I just feel like I'm behind, still trying to catch up from vacation. I noticed I had the wrong slide up this morning. Not, just struggle. I'm on the struggle bus a little bit, but
Yeah.
we're getting there. We're getting there. It'll get better. So how are you this morning?
Good. How about you?
I'm tired. Don't you love that about vacation? It's like you have this great time on vacation. You come home and you get the vacation slump, and it's kind of like just so tired. I need to be on permanent vacation. Hey, do you want to hear something funny?
Sure.
All right, so I'm going to share my screen with you this morning because I thought you might like to see this. Okay, here we go. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
This is the big news for today. This is it.
Wow.
Are you excited? Now listen, it gets so awesome. Okay. The country music star 28 released a lengthy apology on Thursday after receiving backlash for a post on X where he stated that Ye, formerly Kanye West, is better than Taylor Swift. In the short X post on Tuesday, he also said the Philadelphia Eagles are superior to the Kansas City Chiefs, the team on which Swift's boyfriend Travis Kelce plays. Eagles greater than Chiefs, Brian wrote in his original X post, according to screenshots shared by Variety and the Rolling Stone. Kanye greater than Taylor. Who's with me?
Wow.
The Something in Orange singer has since deactivated his X account, but on Thursday he took to his Instagram story to apologize for the message. Welcome to America in 2024.
It only would have been better if you would have done that in your NPR voice. That's what you should have did that in.
Okay, Eagles greater than Chiefs, Brian wrote in his original X post, according to screenshots shown by Variety. It's just, are you? I mean, literally, are you kidding me?
Yeah. Well, it's typical. It's typical. And that's why we're in so much trouble with everything. I mean, everything's all entertainment all the time.
Well, I wanted to make a point from this post before we get into our very, very important show for this morning. If the four of you out there who are going, oh my gosh, I got to do something about what Michael and Jenni say. I mean, they've got these topics and it's worrying me. I got to do something. Do you realize how far just four of you can get while everybody else is worried about what Kanye West and Taylor Swift and Zach Bryan are saying? Do you get it?
Yeah.
I mean, come on. While everybody else is mired in bread and circuses, you people can retake the world. So just think about that.
Well, I think that's kind of what's going on behind the scenes in the first place.
I think, you know what? We can get pretty dadgum far, because if these people are worried about what Zach Bryan says in a tweet about Taylor Swift and Kanye West, and it's created this much of an issue.
Yeah. Well, I've been thinking pretty hard about.
Are you okay?
Me? Yeah. Oh yeah. You know that. I've been thinking pretty hard about, the left and all this scientific, science basically been dominated by the left, and that's okay. I mean, we know that they have an agenda. But I've been thinking real hard because they're so good about rebranding things.
Yeah.
It used to be global warming. Now it's climate change. They're just going to evolve things to, match whatever the current deal is. But I think, Jenni, we need to start pushing out on all the CO2 stuff. Okay. We need to rebrand that as a war on vegetables. That's what we need to rebrand that to. This is a war on vegetables. I mean, literally. I mean, that's what they're.
You choked me up. That is hysterical. We do need to do that. It's a war on vegetables.
I mean, the basic common sense of carbon dioxide in the life cycle is just mind blowing. But ultimately, what is all this stuff with carbon dioxide? It's control. It's land grab. I mean, that's what all this stuff comes down to. It's more control because we're carbon based. And here's another thing. You think about all these vegan lefty maniacs, and I'm not picking on them. I'm just saying that's who's involved in all these big movements. But the marijuana that they're smoking is a carbon chain. They're inhaling carbon. So that's a problem right there. They're eating vegetables, which are carbon. All the chemicals in their body are made out of carbon. I mean, what do we do?
Well, I think what we're going to have to do is just do like you said. I mean, I think having these three guys on this morning is going to do so much. And we got a nice audience on, especially on Rumble. So good morning, Rumble. We love you. I think everybody's going to have to call their buddies while we're on and say, hey, get on this podcast and listen to what these people are saying, because I don't think people understand how bad this is. And the guys are going to be able to tell us, but I will tell you this. I did some research on my own last night and looked up some stuff on it. We'll talk about it as we go on, but Oklahoma is involved in this, and it's just a bad deal. So we're going to try to do this and see. We've never had three guests at one time. So this is going to be fun, but we're going to pull them all on here and get going. So first of all, I'm going to bring on Robert Nazario. Good morning. How are you, Robert?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Perfect. Okay. And then we're going to bring on former Congressman Steve King. How are you this morning?
Just great. It's beautiful here in Iowa.
And is it?
Yes, it is. I looked out across the landscape this morning and said my morning prayer with the sunrise and a cup of coffee in my hand. And how could you start the day any better?
No, amen. That's very good. And then I've got to pull down here, which I'm not able to do very well. And we'll get our other Steve on. How are you? Good morning, Steve Kinkle. Can you talk now?
I hope so. Good morning. Can you hear me?
Hey,
all right.
All right.
So we're all good. We're all good to go. So we look like the Brady Bunch this morning, which I feel like we should all start singing. Here's the story. But so I'm going to start with you, Robert. Tell me a little bit about the Freesoil Foundation. Just give me kind of a little uptick on that.
Well, the Freesoil Foundation started a year ago or so when we had our first meeting in Fort Dodge. We met 200 to 300 people came. We were at that point fighting for our property rights against the abuse that we see coming down the pike with the abuse of eminent domain. At that time, the order wasn't given by the Iowa Utility Commission, but we felt our job was to fight the abuse that we saw coming and to inform the general public that we do have land rights. They're God-given rights, not granted by government, and it's up to us to stand against those that wish to steal, to take what is not theirs. A private company aiming to destroy our eminent domain God-given rights that are granted to us by the Fifth Amendment, our property rights.
Well,
And,
now you started in Iowa. You started in Iowa,
yes,
but
we
you
started
now have
in
other
Iowa.
states.
Yes, ma'am. So we cover a big footprint with actually legislators in North Dakota and South Dakota, and we have partners in as you see there in Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma. So we started because Congressman King has always stood for constitutional principles. He and others, and the board and the advisory board is listed on our website. He and others saw a vision where we must unite across party aisles and come together in strong unity in numbers and defeat this, what I call a domestic enemy that wants to trample on our rights.
That's a pretty interesting way to say that, a domestic enemy. And I'm going to throw it to Congressman King. So how do you see this? What kind of a domestic enemy are we talking about here?
Well, I think first, Robert's words are chosen right out of the oath to the Constitution that many of us have taken to pledge to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And they're foreign enemies for sure, World Economic Forum foreign enemies, but they're also domestic enemies. We have a homegrown domestic enemy here, many of them, but the lead one on this is Bruce Rastetter. He is the lead, I'll say the lead voice of the Everything Summit, Summit Carbon Solutions, Summit this, Summit that. And he has been driving this. He's got ethanol investments in Brazil, building up to 6 ethanol plants there. He's been in the ethanol business in Iowa. He dropped all of that some time back, but they cooked up this plan, and the plan has been in the works, laying the foundation for it as far back as 2011 that I can document, and I think it's probably before that. But they've been putting the pieces in place in each of these states, in the Dakotas, in Iowa, and I think in some of the other states that I can't put my finger on, with the idea that they were going to set up this I'll say carbon credit system, and the carbon credits turn into a global currency with the scheme that comes out of the World Economic Forum. So it comes down on us, and what in the end what it is, it's a tax on we the people, and puts us in huge debt for our children, our grandchildren, and beyond. And meanwhile, for a crazy idea that they're going to sequester this carbon, the CO2, and I like the way Michael talked about it this morning, but to put that down into the earth supposedly forever, and in doing so, suck the CO2 out of the atmosphere. This is the project they have here that's centered in Iowa, but goes into the Dakotas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Illinois. And by the way, I've spoken at events in all of those states pushing back against this. But that's the largest project conceived in the world, according to the Republican George Soros of the Upper Midwest, Bruce Rastetter, the lead on Summit, and even still, if they get everything they're trying to do here with eminent domain, condemning private property across 2,500 miles of some of the best farmland in the world, if they get all of that and the largest project possible that's been conceived here, they'd still would only be getting 1/2,222nd of the CO2 that's released into the atmosphere by man-caused activity every year. So we still have to do 2,222 minus 1 to get to carbon net zero by 2050. But even if that should happen, which I say you'll never be able to quantify this, then they want to begin to reduce the CO2 content in the atmosphere after 2050, which we all know now. If you can do that, then you can starve the population incrementally until you get to this population number that they are looking at. These people believe they are gods. They even believe they have science that can suspend the aging process and reverse it. And they are atheists to the core. So that means they've assigned themselves gods, and they're going to manage all of us. That's what we're faced with here.
Well, you in Iowa look like you have the largest share of this pie. I mean, when you look at what their project footprint is, this is on their own website, Carbon Solution. What is it? Summit Carbon Solutions.
This is Summit Carbon Collusion. I like the ring of that, but it's actually Summit Carbon Solution.
Leave it to me.
Well, and this wasn't the first. This not the first attempt there. I mean, wasn't there the Heartland Greenway back several years ago that was trying to go back east with that pipeline? Also, I believe.
I think that was part of it, and I think people also should be thinking about how this all came to pass. But it was sold to the European Union out of the World Economic Forum and into the governments there, and then sold to the Democrats in this country. When I went into Congress in 2003, Ed Markey was on the floor on a regular basis in special orders talking about cap and trade. Well, that was one of the forerunners of this. And then yes. And of course, he's in the Senate today, still pounding away on this subject matter. You had Al Gore and John Kerry, both of them believed that they could manage the Earth's thermostat. And then, so once the cap and trade kind of dribbled down, then they came with the Build Back Better plan, which was actually cooked up by the World Economic Forum in Japan in 2015. And in that Build Back Better plan was AOC's Green New Deal. But the Build Back Better plan went down because they didn't have the votes in the Senate. Because the irony of this is that Joe Manchin from West Virginia blocked the Build Back Better plan with the Green New Deal in it because he wanted his pipeline in West Virginia. And so they went back and cut a deal, and Joe Manchin got his pipeline, and then he backed up and supported the Inflation Reduction Act, which is another misnomer. But in that is AOC's Green New Deal. Yeah. And the super irony of it is that the people that are leading this in Iowa, Bruce Rastetter, former Governor Branstad, I'll say Governor Reynolds seems to be supportive of this. The network here, these are red states, populous states, the Dakotas, Nebraska, and Iowa. And the people that are leading all this now and pushing it are Republicans that have embraced the barmaid from the Bronx, AOC. It's ludicrous. And I said to them the other day, I keep pinching myself, when am I going to wake up from this bad dream?
So it's interesting that you say that this morning, because I told you earlier that I get up and read all kinds of stuff in the morning. So I want to share this tab with you just because of what we just said. This was in my mailbox this morning. What did you just say about red states? And I went through this because it's a very short, but a group of Republican governors are pushing back against clean energy mandates. But hold on a second. So at the bottom, here's what it says. The organization says it aims to ensure continued energy choice, minimizing permit and other regulatory barriers, limit expensive energy mandates, focus on energy infrastructure affordability and reliability, and coordinate to manage any energy resources and the environment. What does that sound like to you, Congressman?
Kamala Harris's word salad.
This is Oklahoma, but this is the other thing I wanted to show you, because we talked about you and I talked about this briefly, because I wanted to know about Summit. And so I actually went and looked on Summit's website just to kind of see what was going on there. And here's what it says, along with 600 plus million already raised from prior investors, including Continental Resources. Well, who is Continental Resources? Let me just share this tab with you. Who is that?
That's right.
Yeah. Harold
That's
Hamm.
in our backyard. That's
Yep.
Harold Hamm. That's in our backyard. He's one that's driving this by adding, by giving money toward the effort. So then it says Tiger Infrastructure Partners Summit has secured commitments of an additional 400 million, including 300 million from TPG Rise Climate. And I looked them up, and guess what they are? They're just an inaugural climate fund. Michael, you're a finance guy. What's going on here?
Sounds like a lot of money. A lot of money getting ready to change hands.
Well, Congressman, this is, I mean, we need to go back in a minute to just how horrible carbon capture is, because people need to understand that. But explain to me, because you've been in the process. I mean, they worked pretty hard to get you out of the process because you were doing a pretty good job. So explain to our audience, why is it important that these are private companies pushing this? Shouldn't we say, well, hey, that's free enterprise. That's America. That's who we are. What's the problem with this?
Well, I'd say first that Bruce Rastetter and Harold Hamm have a relationship for sure. They did a panel in North Dakota and sat side by side and talked about this. Bruce Rastetter, his presentation for Summit throughout these states, yeah, that's the guy, and throughout these states has been, we're gonna sequester this CO2, put it in our pipeline, pump it to North Dakota, and it's only going to be used to pump it down into the ground to put it there forever. But he's sitting there on the panel with Harold Hamm, and the oil industry in North Dakota says we have to have CO2. We have to have CO2 for fracking, and so the dichotomy here is it's going to change. That there's some kind of a plan going on, but here's what it is. I said in a speech I gave in Bismarck here earlier this year at the Northwest Landowners Association. 26 states are parts of that organization. I said that the governors and the top legislative leadership within the states of North, South Dakota, Nebraska, and Iowa are essentially wholly owned subsidiaries of Bruce Rastetter and Summit. He controls those state legislatures, and he controls those governors. And I served in the Iowa Senate for 6 years and in Congress for 18 years. And on top of that, the Iowa congressional delegation, 4 Republicans, all of them fairly fresh, haven't been there that long. But there was a bill that was coming to the floor last summer, now it would be, I guess. And it was the debt ceiling bill. And in that debt ceiling bill that had all the leverage that they could muster, they had stripped all of those carbon credits out so that they would have blocked this Green New Deal. And the Republicans were universally in support of stripping all of these credits out and controlling the budget, except that then Speaker McCarthy needed the 4 votes of the Iowa delegation in order to pass the debt ceiling bill. And the 4 members of the Iowa delegation, including my successor, Randy Feenstra, were in Kevin McCarthy's office at 2:30 in the morning, virtually, not literally, but virtually pounding on his desk, demanding that he put $38.6 billion of credits back in that bill before they would vote for it. And he had to have the votes, and so he conceded that and put it in. The next day, they were bragging about it on radio on 50,000 watts out of Des Moines. And so the real part of this is that less than a month before that happened, Bruce Rastetter wrote a maxed out check to each of the Iowa congressional delegations.
Oh, no.
$100, and into Randy Feenstra's PAC, $20,000, and into one of the others, $10,000. But that's not all. What really brought my attention up was the same filing within hours, I'll say within 48 hours of each other, Paul Singer maxed out to all of them too. And if you Google vulture capitalist, you're going to see Paul Singer's name come up in the top 10, around number 5 or 6. And he's a partner of Rastetter's. And I have pinned him down in several meetings and asked directly of the panel that represents Summit, is Paul Singer an investor in Summit? They say, I don't know. And I told them last
I
night.
don't know.
I told them last night, if you can't deny it, we know now we have proven that Paul Singer is an investor. And
come on, you have to seriously. I mean, we have to find a little levity here. That's just hysterical. Well, I don't know.
Yeah.
I mean, come on.
I hope that Robert captured the look on Summit's guy's face last night when I asked that question. And of course, he said I didn't know. And I said, then we have confirmed he is an investor because you've had over a week. And so, but I just, Paul Singer was also the guy that started the Steele dossier that began the Russia hoax and handed it over to Hillary Clinton's operation. So that's how devious this guy is. And if he's an investor, and I absolutely believe he is, the timing of these donations couldn't have been any more succinct. So that's what we've got. And I don't remember what your question was anymore, Jenny. But
well, I want to ask real quick, Congressman. Like, obviously, this is just basic common sense that you're just, putting into this entire thing. I mean, the constituents up there, they just completely they don't believe anything you say, or they just think you're crazy, or they're just like, oh, I mean, what is their sentiment when it comes to this stuff?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that. They believe, I think the folks that did what they did to me believe that they had destroyed my reputation.
Yeah.
But I've been all over everywhere here, and I don't get one word of a respectable Republican coming up to me, chastising me for anything. I get a lot of them that come up and say, run for office again. I sure appreciate you being here and doing all that.
Yeah, because I want to go through all of that again, right?
No, but you know what I've done? I've stood before, I don't know, hundreds of people multiple times and said, if I've ever lied to you, if I've ever let you down, there's the microphone. Come tell everybody. Nobody's ever gone to that microphone, and I don't know of any other politician that ever pulled such a stupid move as that, but I got away with it.
I don't think any that we know should, right, Michael? Okay, so the question I had asked you earlier was how, because this is all private capital driven by private organizations that Republicans get behind because we're all for free enterprise. How do we, as people, how can we get in between these private companies and our land? There's no representation for us here. What can we do? I mean, but maybe we should back up. Maybe we should leave that for the end. Which one of you guys wants to cover what carbon capture is and why we need to be extremely concerned about it, because it can kill us? I mean, it's just flat, straight up. This stuff can kill us. So who wants to delve into that? Steve Kinkle, do you want to go there?
I'm more or less on trying to protect my county and the residents.
Okay. Then that's what we need to talk to you about for sure. So let's do this. Okay.
I can cover some of that. Okay.
Good. Go.
I'll cover some of that because we have ties. You and I have ties.
Yes.
I worked for Atlantic Richfield, ConocoPhillips out of Oklahoma. So Phillips I know the pipeline industry. I know that what we put in a pipe is not always contained in the pipe. So what they want to do is they want to run a 2,500 mile line through the greater Midwest at a pressure of 2176. CO2 expands. If a leak happens, CO2 expands, has an expansion rate of 400 to 600 times.
Wow.
And that's why when you look up videos, that one particular video was released in the European market by DNV, Delta November Victor, CO2 rupture. If you look up that video on Rumble or YouTube, you can see, look up DNV CO2 rupture. You can see the effects of what a release does. That is an 8-inch line we're about to see. It starts off with the panel and then it goes into the video. So you'll see a panel of the survivors of Satarsha, Mississippi, where a line blew, a 24-inch line blew. And and it caused havoc, sending 45 people to the hospital. Some of them were near death because their cars stopped. They had the windows rolled up. They passed out. They were foaming at the mouth. And if it wasn't for the brave emergency responders, those folks would have been dead.
Okay, now I don't have exactly the one that you were talking about, because I don't think I'm sure that I know what that one is. But here, this was an article that I read. It was actually from NPR. And I was kind of shocked because the U.S. is expanding CO2 pipelines. One poisoned town wants you to know its story. And so for whatever reason, NPR really did a great job explaining what happened in Satartia, Mississippi. But this is the guy, Damaris Burns. He was he had his mother, had his kids, and this pipe, CO2 emissions pipe, broke, and it started releasing CO2 into the atmosphere. And he was on his way to his mom's because apparently there were emergency sirens and things going off, and there were things coming on the radio, and he couldn't get there because his car stopped, because you have to have oxygen to be able to cause the gasoline to ignite. But CO2 is going to eat up all the oxygen in the atmosphere. And so it caused his car to stop. And then because of the fact that CO2 is what we breathe out, right? Because that's what living organisms do. Living organisms breathe out carbon dioxide. Plants and other green organisms, cyanobacteria, all kinds of things pick up carbon dioxide, and they turn it into oxygen, which then in turn the vegetables use, all of us use to live. So he passed out in his car and nearly died from asphyxiation, like somebody put a pillow over his face, because he couldn't breathe. This happened in this town in Satartia, Mississippi, where 45 people suffered some kind of CO2 poisoning from a pipeline break. I am sorry, all of you guys, this does not sound like anything I want in my backyard.
Nope.
That's exactly right. And Summit Carbon Solution downplays that event, and they call it a simple asphyxiant. They say that what happened down there happened because hydrogen sulfide did it. And yet the PHMSA report that came out of that,
what did it?
Hydrogen sulfide. There was another agent within that pipeline. It was part of the capturing process. It was more natural. It's not like ours up here, right? So it says they want to downplay it, and they say that those folks were injured not just by the CO2, but by the hydrogen sulfide. Okay, again, I worked in that industry. Whenever we did a tank entry or confined space entry, we always wore those meters. I know that's deadly, but the cue was this. The PHMSA report makes no mention of any measurable, they took readings after the event within an hour and a half, no measurable hydrogen sulfide in the air. It was CO2 that did it.
Well, and if
Summit
I remember
Carbon Solution,
remember my chemistry correctly, hydrogen sulfide is pretty heavy, right?
It's heavy also, yes.
Right. So it would stay down by the ground. So if there was some in there, they should have been able to record it for quite a while after the event, correct?
Correct. So they had
okay. The only reason what I'm trying to do is with even though I'm a biologist and not a chemist, as we've talked about on this program before. Still in all, people need to understand exactly what the mechanisms are, behind what these people are talking about, because I don't even think, and this sounds terrible, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think our curricula, science curricula in our public schools is so horrible anymore that I don't even think kids understand that they breathe in oxygen and release carbon dioxide.
Correct.
Sorry. So I think
And-
we've got to
and-
start at the very bottom and explain to people why, number one, this is stupid. And number two, why this can affect them and why it's not just property rights, which is huge because they're going to take your property by eminent domain to create these pipelines, right? But if they
Right.
do that and put it in your backyard, you have a pretty good chance that something might happen to you and you end up dead. Okay,
That's
I'm
exactly
sorry,
right.
Robert,
And that was my
continue.
point. Yeah,
I would just say
and that
why-
is my point.
So, okay.
Go ahead, Congressman.
I just want to point out that in Satartia, there was also some discussion of whether that hydrogen sulfide was enough of an aroma that it gave some people a warning. And they might have had fatalities if they hadn't had the hydrogen sulfide in there, because you can't see or smell or taste the CO2. You're just asphyxiated before you realize it. And the stunning narrative about CO2 is something that it is in 1986 in Cameroon in Africa. There was it was at a place called Lake Nyos. There was a lake there about a mile square in size, and there was a natural, I'll call it a burp of CO2 that came out. And when it did, what CO2 does, it comes up and then it just immediately just flows right down to the lowest spot. So it went down to water level because that's the lowest spot, covered that lake, and then it moved and it went to the lake's outlet, and it went down the valley at below the lake's outlet where there were villages. There were 1,746 people that were killed by CO2, asphyxiated by CO2. There were 3,000 to 4,000 head of cattle and uncounted goats and chickens and every other critter that was up and down that valley. And there's an interview out there on the internet, and I've watched the interview of the individual that walked in there after the things had cleared and he could survive. And he talked about seeing bodies laying whatever they were doing. If they were feeding the chickens, they're laying among the dead chickens. But dead people all the way down, dead cattle, dead everything all the way down. And the thing that was the eeriest when I heard him say this was, he said, of all the death that was there, there wasn't the sound of a single buzzing fly.
Oh
It
my
killed all the
gosh.
flies too, all life, dead.
Wow.
And this is then after I dig deeper into this, I began to ask the question, what was the furthest fatality from Lake Nyos where the eruption was? And it's stunning, 14 miles downstream. That's how far that can go. And it wasn't as cold in Africa as it gets in North Dakota or Iowa. But cold air holds that CO2 down. And I'd like to know, I can only speculate that we've got a place up here called Owl Lake, and it's one that had drainage wells in it. But they actually have drained it now on more of a surface drain. But that lake all sits there, I don't know what it is, a couple sections, something like that. And if you had a break in a CO2 pipeline there on a cold day when it's 20 below here and there's no air moving, I don't know how long it'd sit there, but I know I could put CO2 in my cooler and drive to Florida, and it's still, dry ice. And when I get there and a week later, it's still in my cooler. So it doesn't just dissipate the way someone would like to tell you it does. It's killed a lot of people.
Wow.
Yeah, Steve, you bring up a good point because we brought the EMA director from Satartia up to the Iowa Utility Commission hearing up there, and he told me himself that it wouldn't have been for the hydrogen sulfide in that CO2. He can't imagine how many people would have died because they were trying to get away from that rotten egg smell.
Wow.
Well, and that's a good point too, because I don't know that people, a lot of us who live out on farms have propane tanks, and even those of you who have natural gas, they put a hydrogen sulfide in it because it does smell like
An odorant,
rotten
yeah.
eggs. And that's to alert you if you have a
Right.
propane or natural
Right.
gas leak. So
Right.
you can smell that. So they
Right.
must have put that in there for, for that reason. So
Well, it was unpure, just from the makeup of it. But
Oh,
we've
okay.
asked the pipeline companies here, we've asked Summit to put an odorant in it, so we know, especially with the landowners who are being forced by eminent domain to being on their property, and they refuse to put that in there.
wait, what?
Yeah, they will not put an odorant. They said it'll cause corrosion to their pipe. They're more worried about their pipe than they are lives.
Well, but let's just note that I think as the congressman has pointed out, a lot of people who are supposed to be watching out for us are more important or more interested in their pocketbook as well, right? So, as the Bible says, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? It's not money, it's the love of money that is the
Yep.
root of all evil. So, Mr. Kinkle, why don't you tell us who you are? Because you're probably one of the guys that needs to tell us what we can do. So tell us who you are, what you do, and kind of go from there.
Sure. Appreciate the opportunity today. I am finishing my 12th year as county supervisor in Shelby County, Iowa. I'm chairman of the board. I also am a 5-generational century farmer. I live on a century farm, and the pipeline is in my backyard a mile away. It all started out, next month will be 3 years I've been at this fight, trying to protect my county. I found out about this huge pipeline from a neighbor who got a certified letter from Summit saying there's going to be a landowner public hearing in on it. And he called me and wanted to know what was going on and didn't believe me that I knew nothing about it. And I will have to say, in my 12 years as a supervisor, any kind of big project from outside of the county that's ever come to in our county, whether it's an animal confinement, a windmill, a solar project, they're meeting with us months, if not years, prior to announcing the project, wanting to know about our concerns, what our ordinances look like, our setbacks, blah, blah, blah. There was none of that. And then I found out none of that. And then I found out that we had an ordinance in place to protect our economic development areas in our county. We had a 2-mile setback from all incorporated areas to protect economic development. It's because if you look at any town, where's your growth for industrial use or new housing? It's on the outside of town. Well, here to come find out, I live close to a little town called Erling. Okay, we found out the Provost pipeline is 131 feet from the corporate limits of that town, violating our 23-year ordinance on
2
setbacks.
miles.
Right. And so we went to enforce that. We revised that ordinance to include CO2 pipelines after we found out about that, to set setbacks in for the rural areas, because we weren't addressing that, just the cities. We went to enforce that, and within 4 days, Summit filed a lawsuit on our county and us 3 supervisors personally. And to this day, we're in federal district court with 8th Circuit on appeal, trying to protect our county.
Wait, so your county, you're like a county, what we would call a county commissioner, right?
Yep.
Okay. So your function is the same as in Oklahoma, a county commissioner. And they never came to you, Summit never came to you to try to get this installed. Nope. or work with the county or anything else.
Nope.
They put this county in 136 feet from the actual line.
City limits.
Yeah. And instead of the required 2 miles, and then they sued you.
Yep. Because they're saying we're trying to zone them out of the county. And our first response is, we have a variance. Come and tell us where you need a variance. Do you need a mile? Do you need a mile and a half? What is that? They have yet to ask us for a variance. They just said, this is a federal pipeline. You don't have nothing to say. But what I say to that is, PHMSA says right in there, they send a letter to CEOs and they say they have no authority on siting. It's state and county. They specifically say that. And our county residents have been following setbacks for generations. I mean, we have setbacks for animal confinements, for windmills,
we do
for
here.
solar.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't want any setbacks. And with that, we can't protect ourselves. My job as a county supervisor is protect the well-being, safety of my residents and their property. How am I supposed to do my job if they're not going to abide by the law?
Yeah, they don't follow the law, and then they sue you if you try to make them follow the law. That's the bottom line.
They've sued 8 or 9 counties in Iowa now that have put in ordinance with setbacks, which has scared. We have 99 counties in Iowa, which has scared a lot of other supervisors from wanting to get involved. So they're succeeding in my book.
So we're using lawfare then. So you'd
Yeah.
have to consider that lawfare.
Yeah. And I mean, it's a known fact up in South Dakota, they released some flume modeling, and the kill zone for just a 10-inch line is 760 feet in a minute. And this line, as it gets up in Dakotas and northern Iowa, as it
No.
leaves our states, 24-inch. And then you go and force eminent domain. There was 849 partials in Iowa, not 8 or 9, 849 that they filed eminent domain on. Almost the vast majority of these are generational farmers. To me, they're playing an assault on family farms, generational farms, because that's mostly what we are here.
Well, again, doesn't the WEF, Congressman, I'm sure you'll go here with me on this. The WEF really only wants us to eat bugs anyway, right? So, I mean, what do they care about farming? They have to have their corporate farms because they can control corporate farms. They can't control us little sheep farmers out here in eastern Oklahoma County. So I think that's the problem, and that's what we're seeing. Because if you look, and Michael and I have had shows on wind turbines and solar farms, installations in Oklahoma, and now the carbon capture. And we're going to have another show on the transmission lines, the transmission line corridor, which is also going to pull property away from property owners by eminent domain. All of this is to get as much property out of the hands of individuals as possible, because property makes us freer, right? So if we can manage ourselves and our homesteads on property, because we can grow things, we can, have animals, whatever. Nobody in the WEF wants an individual. I mean, that's not according to their plan, because individuals want to be individual.
Well, if you don't own land, you can't live off the grid. And if you can't live off the grid, you can't escape from the web that they've created globally over all of us. Yep. And this, and they are consolidating land as quickly as they can. It's not only Bill Gates buying a lot of farmland, but for example, I turned a stack of report into our state attorney general of pieces of ground that have been pulled together and put into an LLC. There's a whole area of that over in an adjoining county to me. It's into different LLCs, but when you look at the public record of that, the mortgage is signed by the same guy in Virginia, whose name I actually don't remember now. And so this, and you can have any number of partners in an LLC. There's no way we the people can crack the code to get into who it is whose fingers in money are into these LLCs. You set up one front man, he signs the mortgages, and you can have a dozen or more, well, unlimited amount of LLCs consolidated, and you can just take that land over. They've been doing that, and you end up with a local farmer who is actually identifying the property to be bought. And then they say, okay, Joe, you get to farm this land, and this is going on. But the LLC buys the equipment, owns the equipment, buys the inputs, does the marketing, makes all the decisions. And one guy there, Joe, gets to drive new equipment around and act like he's a big farmer when actually he's a hireling for. He doesn't even know who he's a hireling for, but it could well be Chinese money in a lot of that. And so I put that on the desk of our attorney general, and I'm not satisfied that it's being investigated at this point. But what I was told in that meeting was, well, that's not my purview. That's the Secretary of State's office. That's where they have. But I know these people personally. The Secretary of State says, well, we just check the box. They file, we check the box. It's not our job to investigate. And so the Attorney General now has the authority to investigate, but she also, I guess, has some fairly consistent ties with the people that are perpetrating this. And I'm speaking cautiously about that because she's my former chief of staff. Oh, there's a lot in this, isn't there? But I should say also, okay, 2,500 miles of pipeline, 57 ethanol plants. CO2 has value today. It can be converted into methanol. Mm-hmm. It can be converted into at the location site without a pipeline needed. And you can roll that right around and take the methanol and convert it into your sustainable aviation fuel without a pipeline. But so every time I shake this down, I think, why does Summit need a pipeline if we can do all of this from in the locations without a pipeline, without eminent domain? And it boils down to this: that pipeline proposal, 2,500 miles, 57 ethanol plants, that gives them a quasi-monopoly control of the largest mass of the purest form of CO2 known anywhere in the world, at least to me. And so he can sit there, and with that CO2 carbon credits, he can decide whether he's going to accept the guaranteed floor price of the federal government at $85 a metric ton, or if he wants to take it from somebody that needs carbon credits so they can dock at the ports in the European Union. That target price there is $200 a metric ton. And Robert has identified that from 3 different locations. So I don't hesitate about saying that. And that's not the only place that can happen. That can also go up for fracking in the Dakotas, or he can produce the methanol and the green jet fuel at the location site. And then there's a story this morning about the Honeywell contract that has been agreed to down in the Houston Channel area to build a sustainable aviation fuel plant there that would produce 250 million gallons of jet fuel, green jet fuel. And some of that would be ethanol that would come up out of Brazil, and ethanol plants that Bruce Rastetter is building down in Brazil, where he has drilled at least one hole down there to determine if he can sequester CO2 in Brazil. And if he can do that, he'll have carbon credits that he can put out on the global market at $200 a metric ton. That isn't even the whole picture, but it gives you an idea about how big this web is, how it's tied in with the World Economic Forum and the forces at play. The thing that has switched in the last generation is this. We used to say public-private partnerships. That's when King Construction goes in and builds a park in our hometown here because we want to help the community out. We actually have done that. But it's the other way around now. Now it's private-public partnership. It's the private corporations, the globalist private corporations that are telling government what to do so that they can prepare the legal and the regulatory landscape for the plots that they have against our God-given liberty and freedom.
Well,
Jenni, you know what this sounds like to me? This is literally like Enron 2.0. I mean, Enron they were like major star power, with all the carbon credits back then. This is how they controlled all the competition, how they started that whole space. It's the same thing. It's just another playbook.
I just think it's a bigger web than Enron even can see.
Oh yeah, much bigger.
Mm-hmm.
Affects a lot of innocent people.
Oh, clear. So, okay. So here's the thing. We're closing in on an hour, and you guys have done a great job giving so much great information. Tell us, let's start with you, Steve Kinkle. I mean, you are an elected official.
Correct.
There in Iowa, and you're trying to work on behalf of your constituency. What can you tell people here in Oklahoma? Should we go to our county commissioners right now and start telling them about what's going on? Give us some advice. Actually,
yes. I've had comments questions from all around the country, not just my state. I put together a 13-point checklist of things supervisors, counties can do to prepare to get ready for CO2 pipelines coming in there. One of the main ones is to make sure you have zoning ordinances and zoning authority, available to you, and have an attorney. Get an attorney that's how do I say this? Used to your state code.
Okay.
Yep. Make sure you have the setbacks in there. Make sure your economic.
Where can we find your checklist?
Yeah.
I'll email it to you.
Yeah, please do, and then I'll get that out there.
Or Robert has it. He can get it to you. Robert has that.
Okay, perfect. Because Robert's been sending me all kinds of things.
It's on the website.
Mm-hmm. Now I want to ask you a question then, Mr. Kinkle. Here's something that's happened here in Eastern Oklahoma County and in Lincoln County, which is an eastern attached county to mine. When we had the wind turbine people come in, a lot of people, they really rose to the occasion and have been fighting it with tooth and nail and done a really great job. But here's the question I have for you. a lot of the people who have sent what we call centennial farms here, which are, the ones that you were talking about, generational farms, they don't want zoning because they don't want to feel like their farm, they're going to be bound by some, government say on their property. How can we get people to understand that we're going to have some zoning ordinances in order to protect ourselves, not to pigeonhole ourselves,
Yep.
but to protect ourselves? Can you just talk about that just briefly?
Yes, it's ironic that you say that, because that is kind of the nature of the ag community out there. And at one point before I got involved, at my elected job, I felt that way too. But as you look at it, it's a tool to protect you and your neighbors and the community you live in from things that we spent about an hour talking about today. If you don't have zoning and you don't have setbacks, then it's a free for all. And so if that's what you want, it's a free for all. And we even have it in place, and look at what we're going through trying to protect ourselves. It's about protection, because not just yourself, but the tax base in Iowa, my whole revenue is based off property taxes. And if we don't grow, that's what we were trying to protect here. Who wants to build around a CO2 pipeline, especially a new housing development? If we don't grow, that's our future tax base. And again, if we're not growing, guess what? 10, 20 years from now, everybody else that's living here is going to have to pay more because we're not growing.
Or you could get rid of property taxes because they keep you from owning your own property.
Yeah, well, but I don't have any control over that. That's a state.
I know. I just am an absolute detester of property taxes, because
well, I am too,
there's I don't think one founder alive that would have gone, yeah, that's great. Tax people on their property so they can't own it.
Well, it started out as a wealth tax, and that's what it should be based off, not just property.
Yeah. I mean, there are a whole bunch of other taxes we keep, but we won't go there. I just always have to, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I always have to stick that in there. Okay. So we've got your thing. Whoever did, Michael, did you get that up there?
Yeah.
Nice. Good job, buddy. So we'll get that in, something too, so that people have a nice checklist there. What else can you tell us on an individual? I'm an individual landowner. What can I do to protect myself?
First, you go to your county supervisor and see what zoning ordinances you have in place. If Summit or somebody's coming to you, don't try to battle this by yourself. Get an attorney involved. Know what your rights are. That's probably the biggest ones individually. And also be talking to your neighbors. Don't try to do this by yourself.
Well, it's sad because we've talked about this before on this show too. We've gotten to technology. It's such a double-edged sword. Some things about it are great. Some things about it are just detrimental to the human race. And one of those is they make you an insular person. You just simply, well, I can get this on my phone. And you used to call your neighbor and go, hey, did you hear about blah, blah, blah? And you used to have some kind of conversation. Anymore, we're so insular because we can use our little smart devices for everything and to look up everything. And we don't seem to have those conversations. And they're counting on this. I mean, our WEF overlords are counting on this. They want us to be bred in circus to death and technology to death, where we're not having these conversations with other people. And on the end of Wednesday's show, I was talking about going through all the national parks in Utah and meeting Europeans who we ended up getting in conversations with and finding out, oh my gosh, the same thing is happening in Switzerland that's happening here. The same thing that's happening in Germany is happening here. We're already under the we're already going into the world model. We've got, if we don't stop now and put our feet out, like Fred Flintstone, you know, put your feet out. We're sunk. So, if you got anything else, email it to me and I'll stick it up in there. So
another big point is you need to be talking to your state legislators on what's going on here and about eminent domain and what the code looks like there. You have to be talking to them, not just one person either, and where your governor's at and on this subject.
Well, I think we already know that. We already put that up this morning. So, Congressman, I'm going to hit you up with that since you have been a congressman. What happens when you go to your elected officials and you say, this is happening, and they say, well, this is free enterprise. I mean, this is the way this works. This is private. I can't get into it. Help us. What do we say here?
Well, I never let that restrain me. I recall sending some advice to my former colleagues to let's say to address the 15,000 Haitians under the bridge in Del Rio, Texas, and I said, go down there, set up your tables, and hold a hearing right there with that backdrop, and sit there and rail away until they do something to secure the border. And of the 7 or 8 House and Senate members I sent that text to, and I didn't send it as a group text, individual to each one, I got only one answer back, and it was, I wish we had better leadership. There's no member of the House or Senate that can't step up and take a lead on any issue that they believe in. And I've done that over and over again. And so don't give them a pass on this. What I'm seeing happen here is, like I mentioned, Randy Feenstra, but others, they will say, well, don't bring this complaint to me about eminent domain. It's not a federal issue. It's a state issue. But that's the same yahoos that pounded on McCarthy's desk to put the money in place that's driving against it. Don't let them up for air on that one, ever. They use that constantly to duck out of the issues. But what I really think is important for people to know here is that there is a blocking agent. There is a way that we defend at least our property rights to push the World Economic Forum back and the Republican George Soros of the Upper Midwest back. The tool that we have is the Constitution of the United States of America, that nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. And that's hard black letter supreme law of the land. Now, it's altered a little bit by the 2005 decision of Kelo. I won't go into that. It'll take too long, but the Iowa Constitution is even more solid than the U.S. Constitution. And the Kelo decision I mentioned is an erroneous decision, and it will be reversed one day. And that's a quote from Justice Scalia. So here's what I would ask our state legislators to do, and then in all of our states, is that solidify your property rights. When the Kelo decision came down, some of the states did solidify their property rights in their constitution. Iowa fell a little bit short in that. But the one that inspires me the most is Alabama's constitution, which says private property shall not be taken without the consent of the owner. Boom.
No, and I love that.
That's like, yeah, that'll build a great country. And then later on, if you read the fine print, it says, unless the legislature has a specific act to address the circumstances. That's a summary of it. So you do have to have something there if you need a road or a bridge, or that's common practice. The clause, though, is the legislature of Alabama doesn't get off the hook by having a 3-person utilities commission that's appointed by the governor in the case of Iowa. And 2 of them can decide that they can wipe out your property rights, which they've already done. And the 3 members of that board have all been appointed by Governor Reynolds. 2 of them were appointed a year ago, April. And April is important because the state legislature gavels out about the 1st of May or so. And Iowa law says that if an appointment is made and within 30 days of the end of the session and they're not confirmed by the Senate, then they're interim appointments that act as if they were confirmed until the legislature comes in again. Well, the chairman of the Utilities Commission now, his name is Eric Helland, and he was first exiled to Alaska. Then he came back, and they immediately appointed him to the PERB board, the Public Employees Relations Board. He couldn't be confirmed, so she had to pull him, and then she made at least 2 interim appointments of him on that board. And once it was for to be the chairman of that board, well, he was in a nice little holding pattern here, orbiting around. So when the time came to make an appointment to the utilities board, at the utilities commission, she pulled him off of that board, sat him in as chairman of the board. The respectable chair, Jerry Huser, whom I served with, and she's a Democrat, by the way, but a respectable one, she resigned. And I don't know whether it was in protest or not. So immediately we had 2 appointments that happened in April, a year ago, April, that now are the ones acting on this. And so, but here's another point that you just really need to hear. Summit this, summit that, summit the other thing. I just went to the corporate filings and I just typed in search Summit Carbon. And out of that came at least 28 LLCs that are associated with Bruce Rastetter. There are more out there, but that's the ones that have to do with Summit Carbon. So when one's searching around Summit this, Summit that, I come across this corporate filing in Alaska that is 49th Summit Solutions. Well, that's curious that that's there. Well, who's the CEO of 49th Summit Solutions? One Eric Helland, the very chairman of the Utilities Commission now, that's making draconian decisions against the people in this state. Absolutely true. And on top of that, if you Google now 49th Summit, Summit Solutions or 49thsummit.com, I believe it is now. It used to go to a website that said 49th Summit Solutions. Now it flips over to a website that is, I took a shot of it just last night. It is, let's see if I'll have it, I can speak. It is, there's too much stuff been going on here. Here it is. The 49th Summit Solutions now goes to a website called Blueprint Resolutions. It's a nice, slick one, but you go to you get to Blueprint Resolutions that way. And then if you want to contact Blueprint Resolutions, which is supposedly an Alaskan LLC that has an Alaska phone number, 907, dial that number, you get Chairman Eric Helland's voicemail.
No.
And if you want to send an email off that website, it goes to eric@summitsolutions.com. And
what about your ethics?
One more thing,
do
Jenni.
you not have an Iowa Ethics Commission?
Oh, they say there's no business connection between Eric Helland and Bruce Rastetter. That may actually be true, but who could know? Because you can't know who those investors are in the LLCs. And furthermore, if you want to send snail mail to this Alaska company that is now Blueprint Resolution, this just got changed a few months ago, by the way. The snail mail goes to 32-something south of Grand in Des Moines, the rich old section of Des Moines, which is Eric Helland's residence. And meanwhile, he's skipping the hearings in that where he's supposed to be listening in a three commissioner panel. He's missed a lot of those days up there, and they just act like he's there. I don't know if he's so busy with his Blueprint Resolutions that he can't show up for the job that's paying him over $100,000 a year. I don't know, but this hasn't even been legitimately aired out up here because people come down in that, well, that's not connected. You're just being pejorative. I might do that today, though. I got another shot at that one.
Okay. Oh,
Wow.
my goodness.
Feel
You know
like
what I'm
People
finding?
just don't know. Jenni, just like everything, people have no idea what is really going on behind the scenes. If people knew, they would go ballistic.
Yeah, but see, I'm not sure. The guys don't probably know this, but I've done a lot of research on dark money in Oklahoma. And the one thing that has frustrated me in the 2024 elections, we've seen a lot of LLCs now start coming in spending money on elections. We don't have anything about that in ethics law because that was never something that, they've done. I mean, a lot of these political consultants create these groups that are just meaningless. They use a post office box and so nobody can trace them. I mean, it's all about where the money is from, and they want to protect the money sources as much as they can. So they, denature as many of the trails back to them as they possibly can do. Mm-hmm. But it does bother me that you're telling me that so much of this is happening with LLCs. And now I'm starting to think maybe we need to do something to control LLCs.
We do.
Because this is suddenly like an umbrella for everything nefarious where you can't seem to get at the bottom of this. So how do we attack that issue?
We've got to deal with our get to our state legislators for starters, but especially our members of Congress. This is a fairly old law. I mean, it's over a decade old when you're able to set up LLCs, but it's just become epidemic.
And I remember why we had to set up LLCs in the first place. Remember, it was over lawsuits, right? So I have a company and they come in and they sue me. And so then I don't have anything. So it all starts off, as one thing. And then it just, they use that umbrella to cover everything else. There never seem to be bookends on these things.
The unintended consequences, and you wonder whether that was a plan from the beginning or not, or whether
I'm wondering
figured out how to exploit that. It's probably some of each, but this structure that we have today, the regulatory structure, the tax structure, the corporate structure, we cannot continue to survive as a free people under the system that's here, because it grows so fast you can't even identify the growth. And I want to reiterate to people though that at Freesoil Foundation, we have filed 2 lawsuits that as soon as we could file those lawsuits, we did against the Utilities Commission and against Summit, which is, of course, Bruce Rastetter. We filed in state district court and we filed in federal court simultaneously. And we're going to argue a lot of things, but at the core of both of those are the right to property. And there's a decision by the South Dakota Supreme Court, which is terrific. It declares that Summit is not a common carrier, and they are not carrying the CO2 is not a commodity. And if they don't qualify in both of those, they don't qualify for eminent domain. And they say so in that South Dakota Supreme Court decision. It's remanded back to the 2 circuits with the framework of these are the rules. You're not going to be able to convince us they're a common carrier or that CO2 is a commodity. I think it's going to be hard for them to get over that hurdle. They think they can get over that hurdle. There's solid law that supports our initiative here. And we've got a Supreme Court that's a lot better than it was in 2005. And so I think we get this to the United States Supreme Court. I think they reverse the Kelo decision, scrub that one out, and put us back to the text of the Fifth Amendment. And even if we don't succeed there in reversing the Kelo decision, we can still succeed at the Supreme Court and the constitutional level. And the Iowa Constitution and the other states, already we see the South Dakota Supreme Court where they are. So we've got litigation going on in North Dakota and South Dakota and Iowa, at least those 3 places. And we're going to push this thing to the end, to the absolute end. And we've got some allies that have a few dollars here, and I'll be trying to get a little more help from them pretty soon, because Steve King surely can't fund this thing, but I would if I could.
Yeah, no, and that's the problem. A lot of us look at each other and go, well, I don't have, that's the problem. And hiring an attorney is expensive and that kind of thing. But I want to try to close out. And Robert, I'm going to go to you. I know that initially we might have had a problem getting on this morning because you guys are going to public meetings, and they've been having these public meetings, and you guys are going. Can you talk briefly about that and why it's important for us to go to public meetings? Like, for example, in our next county over Lincoln County with the windmills, they did actually have a couple of meetings, and people just showed up en masse, and you could tell that the people who were running the meetings were like, we just didn't expect these people to show up. And they had no good answers for people when, they questioned them about what happens to our property rights and what about the contracts and that kind of thing. And that's where it all started, was people going, wait a minute, I'm listening, and these people are backpedaling and have no idea what they're talking about. Why is it important to go to these public meetings, and what are you finding in Iowa?
These are informational meetings held by the Iowa Utility Commission and Summit Carbon Solution to let the public know about their project. A commissioner is not present, only their representative. No stenographer, no recordings, no audios, and a lot of concern from the people. I have stated in a lot of these meetings, those that are opposed to these pipelines, please stand. And overwhelmingly, with pictures, you can see that the percentage is high in the room. And when I say percentage, 80 plus 90% of the room is standing. It is very important that as a property rights advocate, that we allow those that wish to be voluntary easements, give them that opportunity, because that is their right. And at the same time, those that strictly oppose eminent domain for a private project, make it known. Around here, folks are polite. That's why I love Iowa. I am also born in the Bronx. I am just the opposite of AOC. Just the opposite. And I am here committed, just like the Declaration of Independence states at the very last line. We are committed to see this through. Without property rights, there is no freedom. They destroy this. They destroy the essence of what makes and separate our republic from many other nations. The folks have got to have their concerns heard. The land agents and Summit Carbon Solution are doing these negotiations without full consent. Why do I say that? Because the safety element is being downplayed. Folks are concerned. PHMSA requirement for setbacks. What Kinkle is doing is protecting his county by applying the home rule. That is his right as a legislator of the county. PHMSA setbacks are 50 feet. If Summit wanted to, they can put that pipeline within 50 feet of your home, of your cattle yards, of your farm. When you look at how they route when you look at their proposed routing, a malicious actor couldn't have planned it any more better to do harm to communities. The closeness to communities, to schools, to neighbors, to cattle yards, to farms, to schools, nursing homes. There's one in Charles City that's just up the road from a hospital and a nursing home. So our job is to speak these things out at the public meeting, but as they continually say, it is not part of any official record. That's why I felt compelled to attend these meetings, record them, display them, and have the outrage build, because people see that if it quacks like a duck, I don't know how that goes, but if it
looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, then it's a duck. Yeah,
then it's a duck. The alleged collusion between a quasi-judicial branch of Iowa government, Iowa Utility Commission, and what they are doing by allowing Summit to use eminent domain for their private gain is detestable.
Yeah.
Detestable. And so what I'm going to say is what Steve Kinkle is doing, and the counties that are represented by Mr. Whipple. That needs to happen in Oklahoma. The counties must unite in a strong coalition. The commissioners. Here in Iowa, we have 17 counties that have a resolution that basically says, for this pipeline and this project, we are not going to recognize eminent domain use for this project. You have to get on that in the forefront. The counties must come together and declare they stand with the Constitution, and they are patriots for doing so. They stand with the Constitution. They band together, and in one loud voice, in one great resolution, say, eminent domain means more to us. Our God-given, our property rights, our God-given property rights, they don't come from government, they come from God. That we shall protect your property against these domestic enemies that wish to take. The Constitution says take. Takings, any takings in the Fifth Amendment. That we stand together in solidarity, all our counties, and we won't allow a private company to take or to encumber our land for their private gain. You mentioned, Jenni, you mentioned TGP Rise. You have to expand on that, on some of the things that I've sent you since we've been here.
Okay. Yeah, because I'm going to go through all those texts and pull those things out and then try to get them in a post on the website and put everything together. Who is Right Strategies? Did you see the message? Somebody, Ben Anderson, NWIA,
yes,
great
Right
work, guys.
Strategy. Right Strategy represents Representative Charlie Thompson. It's their campaign. I didn't see the post come up, but they represent in like their camp. Congressman King. They handle his.
I would just say it simply is that State Representative Charlie Thompson is an attorney that also out of Charles City, and Right Strategies are his media people, and they've done a good job.
Yes,
that's what that is. They're good folks, and they're on the right side.
Oh, okay, great deal.
They're on the right side.
Excellent. Well, that's good. That's a good thing. All right. Well, we're going to have to close it up because I know that, and we've had a nice audience this morning live. So we usually have a really larger audience too, as it gets out there after it being live. But anybody have anything, last kind of words to roll this up? Because I think you guys have done a smashing job of explaining how, I don't even know what you want to call it. Horrible. Horrible doesn't even work anymore. I mean, when you have private companies that are invested in by outside investors, some of which you don't even know, are they even in our nation? Are they Chinese investors? And they're coming in and creating something, whatever that is, some kind of so-called infrastructure, but then that infrastructure can actually kill you and take away your right to your own property. And our legislators and elected officials are not protecting us from that. Then we're in a huge, I'm not sure that we can't say we don't live in a banana republic, because in a banana republic, you don't really own property. And if you have a chance to have something, they can just take it away from you. And I feel like at this point, that might be where we are. So who wants to kind of wrap it up and bring it home?
I'd like to make a point on that, Jenni. And
please.
It inspires me, actually, when you ask that question in this way. What can we do? Well, Robert has talked about what we can do with regard to our county supervisors and consolidating the counties. That's a good movement that's going on here in Iowa, I think, stronger than anywhere else. And Steve Kinkle is the lead of that for the county supervisors, as far as I'm concerned, in the nation, as far as the thought process and the leadership on this is concerned. Something else happened in South Dakota that can happen in every one of these states and needs to. And that is that Summit went into South Dakota last year, I guess it's this year, and with their 12 to 20 lobbyists, forced a bill through they called the Landowners Bill of Rights, which is the opposite of that. It took away the local control from the counties and put it into the hands of the 3-person Public Utilities Commission. And they said, well, we gave you rights. Well, they didn't. They took their rights away. Mm-hmm. And if you want to influence, the fewer people you have to influence, the easier it is. You get down to 3, you only have to have 2 of those 3. And that was their calculation. And so South Dakota, when that happened, there were Republicans that were leading on that were pushing SB 201 as the name of the bill that took away the rights of property. And so once that happened, of course, the governor signed it, even though she's a populist property rights governor. I served her in Congress. I know her. And but we the people rose up, and there was a primary on June 4th. They voted 14 incumbent Republicans out of office in the primary and replaced their nominations with conservative property rights candidates across the board, House and Senate. Changes the dynamics in those places. Then they brought a referendum to repeal SB 201. And that's going to be on the ballot in November. I will be in Sioux Falls on the 29th of September advocating for that and supporting them. But that's that movement in South Dakota that says, okay, which takes a little while, but we'll shift the politics in order to get this around to represent the Constitution, we the people. That needs to happen in each one of these states all across this country. And South Dakota set a good lead. Hats off to them. They've really been tough and smart and aggressive. And this referendum, they needed 17,600 signatures. And in a matter of weeks, they had over 34,000 signatures. So they're getting it done in South Dakota. And I want to go up and help them and pat them on the back. And let's do it in every state. Take our country back from local government on up the chain till we get to Washington. Take that back too.
Well, let me just, our friend Becky, who's out in the panhandle of Oklahoma, sadly, it feels like Texas county officials are already in the corporation's pocket and are hostile to these conversations. Do you have any ideas on actions when the county isn't even receptive?
Run some people for office against them who stand up for we the people. There's always going to be more votes from we the people than there are I'm the mouthpiece for corporations. And throughout all these hearings, and Robert's been to 23 of them, I think, Robert, pretty close to that anyway. And I've probably done not quite half of that many. But in my whole
experience, missed the first 4.
Okay, and in my whole experience with listening to people, and I usually stand in the front of the room and watch the faces and the body language. I don't sit down much. But in all that period of time, I could only identify one person who stepped up from the standpoint of saying, yeah, I believe in this pipeline and this project, that wasn't on the payroll of one of the entities that can cash in. And that was last night in Holstein. And I was stunned that somebody would stand up and say that. I know the answer to this, Robert, and I'm going to give it here in a second. I'm watching Robert. He can't help himself. And it's a great thing. But anyway, so I'm looking at that. I'm thinking the first person that owned a farm, she said she signed up, one of the first people to sign up under summits, and she's glad she did. And we all need to get as smart as she is. And I'm just, that's the first time I've seen that. And then a little later, I find out she is the president of the Iowa Corn Growers, and she was making her pitch for them. And so I can say it's been completely devoid of an objective person that wasn't on the take somehow of stepping up and being for this. And the polling in Iowa is 81% against eminent domain for this pipeline, and only 11% are for it. I don't know what they're thinking. Someone were probably misinformed, but that's how that strong that is. In all my years in politics, I know of no circumstance where we the people have been up there in the 80th percentile, and the people on the other side are down to the 11th percentile, and you can't get that done in the legislature. It's because the blocking agents are governors, majority leader, House and Senate. In North Dakota, South Dakota, Nebraska is unicameral, but same deal, and in Iowa at least. So they have locked that up, and they were looking a long ways ahead. Furthermore, the legislative leaders in North Dakota in the House and Senate wrote a joint letter that said, we're really proud of ourselves because we have been changing legislation for 15 years to prepare the groundwork for this. Boy, what an idiotic thing for those guys to confess to. But they have been changing the rules all along. And then the message that Summit has to our state legislators, many of whom have bought it, that, well, you can't change the rules on us. We've invested millions of dollars in this, playing by the rules. And now you want to change the rules? But they changed the rules because they got the rules they wanted to play by. And the legislatures changed the rules on everybody else, but they don't want to change it on Summit for that coalition inside the Iowa Senate, at least in their caucus. And meanwhile, they're actively changing the rules. Summit is in North Dakota and in South Dakota, which I've just described for you. So that's the situation we have, contradictions, and they will say whatever they can get away with until you shut them down on it. And I'm going to keep doing that. So will the rest of us.
To answer that question about what the residents can do, you go to your county supervisor meetings and you ask them, what are you doing to protect me? That's your job.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I want to close out by saying this. I so appreciate that you, and I don't want to speak for Michael because Michael can speak for himself when he can get a word in edgewise. I want to thank you so much for coming on and talking about this. But Congressman King, I just want to end the program by saying this. You have so eloquently just described the problem that we're having in Oklahoma, and the problem that I think Republicans, and tell me if you think I'm right on this or wrong. I think Republicans have been propagandized. And I think we have been propagandized to believe that there's this red and blue. And if you're on the red team, you're automatically a good guy. And you get to go, hey, I'm on the Republican team. I'm just like you. And so what's happened is over the course of time, these people have understood that this is kind of where the public is thinking. And so these guys get into these positions are really Democrats, or they don't even have anything. They don't even have a political aspiration at all. They just want to make money off of the government. And so they get into these places of where they have become elected to an office. And then because they have an R next to their name, everybody goes, oh, well, he's an R. He's great. You know, he's in there doing stuff for us. And then we find out, you know, our governor, we read that a minute ago about what Governor Stitt's on board with this clean agenda or whatever this is. We have Harold Hamm with Continental Industries or Continental Resources in our own state of Oklahoma that's buying into this carbon capture kind of crap. Can you agree with me that we need not look at Republicans as the bastion of assistance for our rights that we used to believe, and we need to research everything for ourselves and not be afraid to stand up against these guys who say they're the good guys because they have an R by the end of their name when we know they're really not?
Well, yes, I agree with you. Absolutely agree with you. And I've said so publicly. And I would believe it was in that same speech I mentioned earlier in this conversation in Bismarck, North Dakota, when I said that I, as a lifelong Republican, I would be willing to sacrifice the Republican seats as far as the majority in the House, the majority in the Senate, and the governor's office to Democrats if that's what it took to clean up the corruption. And that was an applause line, by the way. And I don't say that lightly, as that I want to have legitimate elections. I want to have the corruption out of government. I want to have we the people back in charge of this country. We empowered government so that it could serve us. And now we have the oligarchs, and they think they want to turn us into their servants. And it's stunning to me how few people even mention the Constitution at these meetings as well. They just are. They seem to have given up mentally that they're going to be bulldozed over. Their rights are going to be bulldozed over. And I stand and fight it to the last man. Whatever you have to do, protect this Constitution. And we can protect it at every level, the county supervisors, at the state level, even at the cities also, and at our school boards, right on down the line. But, you know, often it's said that that politics are downstream from the culture. I believe that to a degree, but you can fight a battle at the White House level. And I'm not sure how strong Donald Trump is anymore on these issues, but I had an article from the New York Times I looked at yesterday that named 5 things he would do to take this apart. It was published last April. He didn't come. I could not crack through to him when he was here in Iowa during the caucus. Neither he nor DeSantis nor Nikki Haley would take a stand on property rights, but Vivek Ramaswamy did. And he's been clear and he's been strong, and I endorsed him and I got on the bus with him for several weeks because of that. So look everywhere where we can. People have different connections, different networks, and different strengths and weaknesses. Use those to the maximum. Everybody needs to stand up. And that's my wife said to me the other day, Steve, you need to go get a job. This retirement isn't working. You get a job so you can get some rest. I'm not doing that.
I'm glad you're not, Steve.
Well, I know a lot of us don't. That's just not the way we're built. So, well, guys, I do appreciate. Yes.
Can I throw in a plug, please? Follow us on freesoilfoundation.com and follow us on Freesoil Foundation on Facebook and X. And if any of this shows you that we are going to fight for you, we do have a donate button on freesoilfoundation.com. It is going to be expensive to take this all the way through state court and to the Supreme Court, but we are committed to do that.
Well, and I do want to follow that up
alone.
by saying that once we can get some states who are actually winning on this, it's a great template for us to follow. So if that gives you, if you're like, well, you guys are in Iowa, why do I need to donate? Well, that's the reason why. If we can get them to get a pushback, and you saw the map and saw how bad this was in Iowa, compared to even the rest of the surrounding states. So if you donate to them, then they can create this model of pushing back that then we can use in the other states.
Right. A good friend of Oklahoma. Her name's Sandra, and I don't even
Sandra
wanna
Treywick.
pronounce her last name. Yes.
Sandra Treywick.
Thank you. She opened up my eyes at something I didn't know at all. They have plans for 60,000 to 105,000 miles of CO2 pipeline. This is just the beginning. This battle here in Iowa is happening to break down the constitutional protections on property rights. If this battle is lost in Iowa, Steve, Congressman King, can you finish that? If this battle is lost in Iowa.
Well, I just pick it up this way, and I know you need to close out, but if we lose here in Iowa, I'm telling them here this is that if they can use eminent domain to condemn your private property to lay a pipeline in for a private company, and by the way, there's been no eminent domain used in Iowa for wind turbines, for solar panels, or for rural water lines. But all three of those entities are salivating at the thought that if they can do it for this private entity that's not a commodity, there's nothing in their way to condemn private property going through. That's a major discount on the costs of negotiating easements along the way. So I tell people, if we don't stop this, they will be able to put a wind turbine in your front yard and solar panels on your roof, and there won't be a thing you can do about it. And in 10 years from now, people will accept that as the norm. That's how bad it is, how critical this is. If we win for America, and we can restore property rights all across America and get back to that which was the foundation for this country. And that's the free or the property rights that go all the way back to John Locke and beyond. In fact, when King John signed the Magna Carta, he signed that because he loved his head, not because he had a conscience. But the Magna Carta is anchored in property rights, and a man's home is his castle. There's more to be said about that, but this is so important. It's the root of free people everywhere in the world.
Well, but when you pack them and stack them in apartment complexes, these people don't understand property rights, and they don't even really care. And that's kind of where we're going. Is this look at new home construction. So much of it's going toward multifamily home construction rather than individual residences, because if you can get more people in there, they're not going to be interested in those of us who actually own their own property. So we got to think about that as well. It's a very big web and a large picture, and we've got to be able to see it from the 30,000 foot level to drill down to get to the individual aspects of where they're trying to get us right now. Mm-hmm. So, guys, I truly appreciate this. We've had we've had a great live audience for Friday, and they've stuck with you the whole time. I mean, so that's great. They've been really interested. So I share this, everybody. Thank you again for being with us. I can't thank you enough, Congressman King, Mr. Kinkle. Thank you so much, Robert. We appreciate you so much. And please reach out if you've got anything else that you want us to get out. And we hope to keep in contact with you so that we can help you and allow you to help us in turn. So thank you again for being with us today.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
All right.
Thanks, Jenni.
We'll talk
Thanks
to
for
you
the
soon.
opportunity, Michael.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks.
Bye-bye. There I go. Okay, I threw myself out. That was I don't know, thoughts, Michael?
Well, it's awfully scary that you have someone like Congressman King who literally lays out everything that we've talked about in the past, all the way from just this government control to population. I mean, here you got a guy who's been in, pretty much throughout all of local and state government into, sitting up at the White House, or sitting up in DC, I should say. It'd probably be awesome if he's in the White House, actually.
Yeah.
But you have someone like that literally just saying that, and we didn't prep him on any of that stuff whatsoever. It's just part of the deal. It's pretty scary to see that just this stuff is lying just under the surface of just the mainstream news cycle, all the time. And for him to bring that stuff up, and I want to bring up a couple things for you just from the past, before we close out. But there again, you can solve probably 95% of all these issues by literally returning to our rights ourselves, our property rights, period, without taxation. If we own property, we own property, period. There's nothing they can do. They can't come take it. All this eminent domain, all this stuff. The same thing like with the Pike-Off girls. Same situation. You've got eminent domain coming in to flex their muscle over, these generational farms in one way or another. I mean, it's absolutely ridiculous. And I guess I just think it's a lot of these things are just kind of out of sight, out of mind. There's no top of mind. Like in marketing, you look at there was an old marketing concept called top of mind awareness, TOMA, where you literally, it's just, if you really want to sell something, it's just that little 15-second hit, just boom, boom, just constantly, it's on the top of your mind. Well, these issues are never on top of anyone's minds, maybe besides you or me or the people that really subscribe and follow us here. But if the mainstream people just had any inclination as to this stuff that's really going on, and not what's on social media, not what's on TikTok and Instagram and all these, I mean, all those things have been devised on purpose to distract us away from this slow kill. I've talked about it many times. There's a slow kill. They do these things slowly over time. So when you lose this battle in Iowa, 10 years from now, what happens in Oklahoma, you can't reverse that. And, it's just crazy.
But see, Gracie gets it. They try to keep us focused on a few issues to keep us from seeing those type of things. What did we start off the show with?
Yeah.
We started off the show with me bringing to light a Twitter furor over a country star talking about Taylor Swift and Kanye West.
Yeah.
I mean, holy crap.
Yeah.
And let me just say this. So years ago, what is it now? 14 or 15 years ago, since we started ROPE, Reclaim Oklahoma Parent Empowerment, or whatever it was when we first even started. I don't even remember, I think. We knew that, and we started it because we knew that there was too much money going into the education system for what we were getting spit out in terms of results. And if you can't see now how deliberate that has been and how Marxist that has been, by just going from the 1950s and what people understood about American history to now, when you have these guys who go out on the street and do in-street interviews. Who was our first president? I don't know, but I know Taylor Swift. I mean, the American education system, the Oklahoma education system, has done a beauteous job of turning us into a bunch of morons.
Yeah.
And morons are easily led. Morons don't understand their rights. Morons have no ability to be able to stop what's coming. These people at the WEF know that. You make us morons. We just go, okay, well, hold on. Can you give me some more Taylor Swift? I don't really care if I'm in a box. I don't care. I mean, it's.
Well, that's like the devolution of us. We're devolving. We're not evolving. We're not getting better, stronger, faster, smarter. We're actually going down. we were driving down the street the other day, and Lauren was with me, and I said, Lauren, I said, think about this. I said, think about that movie WALL-E. I said, we're
Yes.
literally turning into that movie WALL-E, you know, where we're just a bunch of, you know, overweight, entertained, you know, have no idea about anything, you know, total convenience, total decadent, you know, lifestyles. That's what we live. But what I want to show you, Jenny, is, you know, we brought up kind of the population deal in the past, and I brought that up with the Georgia Guidestones, you know,
Yes.
last show.
Yeah.
But I mean, this thing goes back all throughout history. I mean, you could
Yeah.
go back to the philosophers of Socrates and those guys, they talked about it. But like the first instance that has really been kind of held by the left more so than anything. And this is my opinion. I thought I already had this up. Let me get this screen up here.
I'm waiting.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you look at Malthusianism, which was, I think his first name was Thomas Malthus.
Yeah.
But this guy was late 1800s, you know, and his whole thing was about population can't sustain itself.
Yeah.
The population's got to be controlled. You have to have fertility and all these things, and you can't just let everybody
I learned about that in college.
Yeah. Yeah. And do they teach that in college anymore? I seriously doubted. You know, you're never going to hear it. Now, when it comes to Marxism, Karl Marx had a little more, he butted heads with Malthusianism, because in Malthusianism, it's more, hey, the population is what is going to cause, you know, all these food hunger issues and this and that. And Marx wasn't so much, he wasn't so much on the food side. He was saying that, you know, without government control, you're not going to have, you know, those issues. But you escalate that up into like the early, you know, late 1800s, early 1900s in the United States. Okay. You had compulsory sterilization in this country at that time. That was on the East Coast. And I mean, this is like what I'm getting ready to tell you. It's not like pie in the sky. Like, you've got Margaret Sanger, who we all know was like part of Planned Parenthood, created the whole deal. Well, where do you think Adolf Hitler even learned all of his genocidal, you know, eugenics type of things from? He learned them from these early practices here in the United States. And even I
in the
brought this Wikipedia
1920s.
up on purpose because you know how Wikipedia, you know, they're slanted, you know, to not necessarily tell the truth. But you just scroll down here, right down here, they start talking about Nazi Germany. I probably already passed, but anyway, they bring it up in this. Yeah, they bring it up in this article itself, where you know, right there, early 20th century, marked the program of eugenics with Nazi Germany programs. Well, Hitler literally like studied. I think that I think the Nazis actually gave Margaret Sanger one of the highest awards you could give someone that's like a non-commissioned officer. And then we come over here. So I don't know how many people know about NSSM, which is National Security Memorandum 200. This was written by our good friend Henry Kissinger. It's known as the Kissinger Report. This was written back in 74 here. So this
hold on just one second. Let me just make the point. Killing Uncle Sam. If you read the book Killing Uncle Sam, you will find out that all of these people from our childhoods, those of us who were brought up around the 60s, who we were taught to revere, were pieces of garbage that were actually more and Kissinger was one of them. Yeah.
Well, you look at Kissinger here. This is literal. This is a 200-page report about worldwide population control. Literal. I mean, it talks about I've read this. It literally talks about controlling fertility, controlling population, sterilizing people. I mean, that's what this thing goes into, literal. And this was, okay, so he wrote that in 74. It was classified. They finally, it shows right, this was finally declassified in 89. Okay. 89, they finally said, okay, yeah, we wrote this. This was a report that was, conglomerated, it was contributed by the CIA, by the NSA, by the State Department, by the Pentagon. They were all in together on this. And you could go through it yourself, but I'm just telling you, this isn't pie in the sky. This whole thing is about control of us, control the population. And we saw what happened with China, how they went to the extreme of the one child policy and literally were, getting rid of all the little girls and you couldn't have babies. I mean, it is insane, but that's their cult. That's the cult of these people.
Well, and when you say getting rid of, you're talking about killing children.
Yeah,
it was infanticide. They did well, but people need to know this stuff. I mean, because it's so heavily sanitized now that you say get rid of, and people are like, "Oh, you mean like I go to I put my dog at an animal shelter?" It's not like that at all. People, this is infanticide, just like what Hitler did to the Jews, genocide. I know we're all stuck on, what's his name said about Taylor Swift and all of that today, and Kanye West. But, the thing of it is that you're an idiot. I mean, I'll just be honest. I mean, if that's where your head is, you are the useful idiot that these people want, because you're not paying attention to anything that's going on. You're believing the propaganda that they put out over and over again. Oh, the government is good. These Republicans are good. My goodness. I even think back to our Republican governor, Governor Stitt. People elected him to this position after his company, private company, Gateway Mortgage, was accused of improper mortgages, producing improper mortgages. So we actually have a person in office who was not convicted. It was just a grand jury, I guess, that went after it and looked at it, but had issues like this. I mean, but then you look at Steve King and look at what they did to Steve King, made him a racist and all this kind of stuff to get him out of the public view. So if you look up Steve King, you're like, oh, I don't know, Steve King. That was all propaganda to get Steve King out, because Steve King's the only one who's going around going, hey, by the way, your government hates you and they're here to destroy you. And here's what they're doing. They don't want our elected officials helping us, doing what we elect them to do. They don't want that. And if they do that, they're, by God, going to get rid of them one way or the other.
Well, let's turn it back around. Yeah, let's turn it back around to like everything I just said and you're talking about. Let's turn it back around into today's conversation, which is the carbon capture. The whole green energy, the whole green movement, I'll just say it for us, because I know you agree. We're 100% against pollution. There's no doubt about that. We do not want to pollute. We want to be as clean as possible, but that doesn't mean that taxing carbon and controlling carbon, which as you eliminate carbon dioxide, you're literally killing life. That is that is one of a couple vital instruments in the entire process of life. I mean, you have photosynthesis on one side, and carbon dioxide is the energy element to that. You have to have that to have life. So as you eliminate carbon dioxide, you're eliminating food supply on this planet, which means in turn you're going to eliminate people, period. I mean, that's what it's going to do, So,
well, you eliminate people with this carbon capture two separate ways. So let's make sure that we illuminate that for everybody who's still on. We've even gotten some new viewers on. So thanks for tuning in. So you eliminate people two separate ways with this stupid carbon capture crap. Number one, I didn't know about what Congressman King was talking about that African village where they killed 1,100 people. People have to understand basic chemistry. There are a lot of elements that, when combined with other elements in the periodic table, create extremely dense compounds. Carbon dioxide is actually a fairly dense compound. You get it together and it sinks. It falls. Same thing with carbon monoxide. Remember, we have carbon monoxide detectors in our homes. Some of us do, because if you have a bad natural gas stove or a hot water heater or something in your house and it's not being monitored properly, you can get carbon monoxide in your house, which kills you just as fast, if not faster, as carbon dioxide, but they all sink. So what happens is this pipeline ruptures that's carrying this CO2 with that help the people who own it. These investors are investing in it because they're counting on the WEF being right, and that carbon capture credits are going to be another, or basically the form of currency going into the future, because they've got to get rid of paper money. They've got to get rid of any money that we could actually have and do anything with. So carbon capture units are going to be those things that are going to be the currency of the future. So these investors are investing in this for that reason, that they believe that this is going to be a commodity of the future that they're going to make money off of. And so what happens is they put in these pipelines. A pipeline ruptures, that carbon dioxide does it go woo, up in the air like helium. That's helium, okay, not carbon when it's combined with oxygen. So it falls like this. Well, where are we? We're down here. We're not up in the trees. And so the first thing that happens is that we now are breathing in what our lungs are designed to expel. It's just like putting a pillow, having somebody put a pillow over your face or a plastic sack or anything else. It suffocates you and you die. But not only just you, anything that breathes out carbon dioxide and has to take in oxygen to survive, which is every single living creature God made upon the earth. That's the beauty of God's creation. We breathe out carbon dioxide. All of the green plants, all of the things that we then consume, use that carbon dioxide to create oxygen that we then breathe in. So, Michael, you're 105 million% right. I just made up a number. That's the other way that's going to kill us. So if they don't kill us by dumping that carbon dioxide out on the ground and just suffocating us to death, they're going to kill us by eliminating the carbon from the atmosphere that our plants use to take in to create the oxygen that we live. And it's going to start.
Yeah. And let's tie in a couple, let's tie in a couple things that Julianne has told us multiple times. So like what Steve said with this whole carbon credit economy, going forward as a currency, Julianne has told us multiple times how they're going to measure your carbon footprint within your house. If you're working from home that day, they're going to see that you ran your dishwasher, you ran a load of laundry.
Smart appliances.
Yeah. Now your carbon footprint is higher in one way or another, which is going to be a bad reflection into your employer. And that's going to come back on you in one way. I mean, the entire system is just, there's no way to get around it. We are a carbon-based life form. Everything we do is some type of carbon bond. Literal outside of water and salt and maybe some other kind of, if you go back into organic chemistry, some other other salt compounds. Yeah. I mean, outside of that, everything is a carbon bond in one way or another. Like I said, that marijuana these people are all smoking, that's carbon. They're taking carbon smoke into their body. Everything that we say and do, it's all the progesterone, the testosterone, those are carbon molecules.
Well, and I think it's important before we get off to mention this. In order to market your own death to you, they have to make it look good to you. So they're going to tell you, oh, you have to get a smart appliance because that's going to keep your energy bills down.
Yeah.
You have to get this because it's going to help you. It's going to knock off your bottom line. You have to get a car that has all this equipment in it. Well, sorry, that's because Obama took all of the old ones off the market so that we could, but then again, how many people bought into that? Cash for clunkers. Well, hey, I can get money for this. You guys have got to quit worrying about your bottom line, and you've got to start paying attention to what's going on, and what they're telling you is not what's actually going on. Yeah. So stop going, oh, well, they just want me to be able to save energy. Screw it. They don't either. They want to make money off of you. Don't pretend that it's anything else.
Well, and their plans, you know, we've talked about it before. These are long range plans. These aren't, hey, we're going to dump all this stuff on you tomorrow with all this legislation, do all this.
Right.
This is over 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, 100 years, whatever. They've got long-term plans. And you can't tell me that it's not effective, because right now, Jenny, we are the most technologically advanced that we have ever been on this planet that we know of. Okay. So we're the most technologically advanced. Are we the healthiest? Are we in the best shape? Do we have all these things? Are we the smartest? Are we the best? You know, are we the most productive, the most efficient? Are we all over space, colonizing, you know, the entire universe? No, everything is going backwards. We're literally some of the sickest people that have ever been on this planet. We have all kinds of mental issues, all kinds of chemical, biological issues. And I'll even go as far to say, as with all the gender bending chemicals that are in our food, in our water, in the air, in all these things, that's what's causing this massive unrest and all these massive problems in all these young people that they're exposed to all this stuff. So I'd say their plan is 100% working on us right now. Fertility is in the tank. I mean, it's as low as it's ever been. I mean, the nutritional value inside food is the worst it's ever been, ever. You can look at a peach from 1950. It has 100 times the amount of nutrition as a peach today. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yep. Yeah, we're weak and submissive. And then Julie got this one in. They want to make money and they want to have fewer people in the world without being convicted of mass murder.
She's right on that. She's right on that.
Bingo. Okay, well, we are 2 hours today. Holy cow. How'd we do that, Michael?
Yeah.
All right, well, we had a great audience today.
I got to give it up to all three of those guys. They're doing some serious God's work. There's no doubt about that.
No, 100%. And if we could just get people to if we could get them to wake up and quit falling into the bread and circuses trap and just, you know, pay attention, like that German guy, you know, in the hot tub. I feel like we're being, what did you call it? What do you call it? Bread and I was like,
bread circus.
Some 27-year-old German guy gets it. So come on, people, we're Americans. All right. Well, Michael, so good to be with you this week because I've missed you and I've actually missed the stupid show. How weird is that? I didn't even know what to do with myself on Wednesdays and Friday mornings. What am I doing? I don't know.
Hey, well, I'm just glad we have an actual record that we can come back to, you know, all throughout.
If they don't scrub it.
Yeah. Say, look at this program. Look at this program. Look what we said here. Look what happened here. You know, Rope was right again.
Well, we're telling the truth, and that does concern me because I do worry that we're going to get knocked off some platforms. So, you know, we've got to pay attention. All right. So on the 25th, so next Wednesday, we're going to have two ladies on from Chickasha who are going to talk about, I mean, basically kind of what we're talking about today, Julia. Hashtag Rope is right. They're going to talk about some things going on in their hometown that is actually just indicative of what's going on in just about every single county in Oklahoma. And certainly we've heard this from our viewers over and over again. And you're going to want to tune in for that because it's just super important to know that pretty much all of politics is local. And if you're not involved at the local level, you're getting screwed over. I mean, the chances are near 90% you're getting screwed over. Then on the 27th, which is going to be that Friday, we're going to talk to Sandra Trawick, whose name actually came up today. And she has the Hee Haw for Health going on tomorrow, Saturday, at her donkey dairy. So if you would like to check that out, go online and search Hee Haw for Health, and you can go visit them tomorrow morning on their farm. And they have a lot of speakers talking about children's health and our health. And it's just a great time. I will be there for part of the time for sure. Sandra has become a real fighter for property rights. And she found out as she was researching the stuff on windmills and solar that we've been reporting on, she found out about this transmission corridor where they're now trying to usurp private land to build these transition lines from windmill sources and hydroelectric sources and solar sources out to the East Coast and into other areas that don't have these things. And they're going to be coming after your property to get that done too. So it's not even going to benefit Oklahoma. And why our Oklahoma legislature would submit to any of that would just be because they're getting under the table money.
Yeah.
And if you don't believe that, all you need to do is go to Oklahoma Ethics Commission and look up and see where they're getting money from. So it didn't help Kevin Wallace, that's for sure. So thank you for being with us. We really appreciate you hanging in with us. But the thing that I know Michael and I want you to take away from this more than anything before you get off here today, share this information. Don't count on your loved ones and your family members and your neighbors collecting this off the internet. You share it with them. All right. Now that I've admonished you, have a great weekend. And I'll see you at Sandra Trawick's Hee Haw for Health tomorrow. Look that up on the internet and find her. And then we'll see you there. And we'll see you again next Wednesday. So have a great weekend.